This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I thought that team was really good, and as soon as I got traded here, you can see how much talent there is, how much dedication there is. The culture is still there from the same culture that we had when we won, and so those were definitely things that made me want to stay. And the guys there are it's a great locker room. It's like everyone's so amazing, so awesome, and it's so fun to be part of that. And again, we want to win, and you can tell. And I think we're right there again, and every single year we want to be right there. Obviously, disappointing end of the season in the first round, but this group was really good, and I really believe in this group.
And they believe in Yanni Gourde. I'm not sure I had that on my bingo card, partner, that Yanni Gourde would be signing a long-term deal to stay with the Tampa Bay Lightning, assuming he fulfills the length of that contract. We know sometimes that doesn't always happen. But Yanni Gourde, I don't think ever wanted to leave, is back.
Mm-hmm.
And a place, let's face it, he has enjoyed his most success in the NHL here with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Well, good to see you, first of all,
you as well,
my friend. We're going to be seeing Jack Michaels, the announcer for the Edmonton Oilers, who has a brief window and will be joining us shortly.
What's going on?
Not tonight, but there's usually a lot of lead up to game one, and it feels like we've been leading up to game one for about a week now. But they have media day today, so Jack is ready. We can get to the Yanni Gourde news, and that we will break it down after we talk to Jack, because Jack is on a much tighter schedule than you and I. We're just kicking our feet up for a Sunday afternoon.
Look at him. He's ready.
Nap. Jack
is ready.
You look like you have just worked a 12-hour shift, and you are like, what? I have to go back to work right now?
He was on the treadmill.
Yeah, I was. I was cranking out a quick workout before I got a roll here for Media Day. Dave, you know all about it. Of course, I familiarized myself last year. And it's interesting how these two teams had different obstacles. Florida's came in the second round, Edmonton's the first round. But I've got to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been surprised had we been teeing up a final with the other team located in the Sunshine State. And I think what's been impressive this year, and this is, I guess not unlike Tampa, Colorado series, I think you've got two teams that have separated themselves from the pack just a little bit and made quality teams like Tampa, Carolina, Dallas, and Vegas look, dare I say, ordinary. And I don't think that's disrespectful to the teams they've beaten. I just think, when Dave experienced this for a 3 to 5 year window, these are two clubs right now that are at the peak of their powers. I don't know whether either will ever be as good as they are right now. And that's what makes this a pretty compelling final, and a little bit different from 2022 in the sense that you got the feeling that maybe that was Tampa's last dance, last chance to win it with that particular group. This situation is, two teams that are pretty darn good. I was very surprised when Florida beat Tampa in 5, and I was somewhat surprised at how the Oilers kind of steamrolled through the last two rounds. Didn't see that coming, and thus I'm very excited to see what happens in this final.
Jack, we chatted when the Lightning and Oilers played right after the Four Nations, and you were accurately, I think, kind of describing this Edmonton team as slow beyond the top two guys, particularly where they were last year, where they lost some speed. Look, they added Trent Frederick at the deadline, but I mean, for the most part, it's much of the same group that we saw down the stretch in the regular season, and they started the playoffs very poorly defensively overall, poorly defensively on the penalty kill. That has gotten turned around maybe with the exception of the penalty kill, which is better, but it's still not as buttoned up maybe as they would like.
How did the Oilers?
How did the Oilers get better?
Games, yeah.
Well, right, and that will hurt. But I mean, they're still leaking a little oil here. You know, the goals that Dallas got seemed like were power play goals. So how did this metamorphosis happen from kind of the beginning of the LA series to the middle of the Vegas series, where they started getting buttoned up defensively, to, dare I say, like championship level defense in the Dallas series?
Well, I think it goes back to the time period you're describing after the Four Nations. Number one, as an older, ponderous team, layoffs did not do them any good. And, they were very slow coming out of the gates in Four Nations. They were able to salvage the last game of that trip, I believe, in Carolina. Lost in Tampa fairly decisively. Florida was close, and then they got over the hump against Carolina. But then they started to get beat up. And here's what I would say is, I would have a slight disagreement only in the sense that the bulk of this team, in fact, the entirety of this team, did not play together at all this year because Evander Kane didn't play a regular season game.
Fair enough.
Trent Frederick played 8 minutes for the Oilers in the regular season. He got hurt on his first shift against LA, labored to get through the game, couldn't do it. Ekholm didn't play at all down the stretch. McDavid and Draisaitl missed huge chunks down the stretch. Excuse me. Hyman missed a good deal of time, and now, of course, he's out for the season. Klingberg was, at that point, a mystery, didn't play particularly well in the regular season, and then he missed the last month and a half. Jake Wallman was acquired, then got hurt down the stretch. He didn't play. So, I mean, literally a third of the team, a third to almost a half of the team missed huge swaths of time down the stretch. And so you entered the postseason and you had no idea what you were getting. And I think, when Kane and Frederick parachuted back into the lineup, Klingberg came in for game 2 of the LA series. I will say this, I'm surprised at how quickly it's come together. And having said all that, you need a lifeline. Usually in a cup run, you need a lifeline. Dave knows this. And against Edmonton, the one thing we've learned is if you give them a lifeline, you're asking for trouble. Not just that opponent, but the rest of the league is in big trouble. LA's up 2-0, led in both the third period of Game 3 and Game 4. Game 3, Edmonton ties the game. It's a no-challenge situation. I actually said Jim Hiller cannot challenge here. Well, he challenged. The Oilers scored a power play goal and won the game. The next game, LA's up 2 with 2 minutes to go. LA's up 1 with 20 seconds to go, and Quentin Byfield is skating up the half wall. All he has to do is lay it off the glass, and we might not be talking, because then it's 3-1 LA, and you're going to LA for Game 5 and 7 if necessary. Instead, he tries to make a play. Bouchard scores. Oilers win it in overtime, and it's been a wagon ever since, 12 wins and 14. So, Dave, I would say this. It's been far more cohesive than I anticipated. And the speed aspect, I have to say this. I honestly believe this. The Oilers fooled a lot of people, including me. They have managed this season. I'm not saying they were jaking it when they played the Tampa Bay Lightning in February. But I'm just saying this team has found another gear. They are skating faster, harder, getting in on the forecheck. They might be a bit healthier than they were down the stretch of the regular season. Whatever the reason, there has been a metamorphosis, some of it explainable, and some of it you wonder whether it's a bit of veteran guile and choosing to play when they absolutely know it matters. I think it's a combination of the two, and I think the guys also perked their ears up when they found, hey, we can play with one another. This is a pretty good team. They just hadn't seen that team in the locker room at any point this season.
Jack, feeling good about the goaltending for Edmonton heading into the series.
Another surprise. I mean, I wasn't sure. Stuart Skinner did not have a good regular season. At any, he played okay here and there, but I mean, the entirety of his season was not good. Calvin Pickard's was pretty good. And when Stuart Skinner faltered in the first 2 games of the LA series, they went to Calvin Pickard. And the only reason Skinner has the net back is because Pickard got hurt. Thomas Hertl fell on him in game 2 of the Vegas series. Pickard gutted it out. The Oilers won that game in overtime, and Skinner has come in and made it impossible for Pickard to reclaim the net. I mean, the Oilers' backup goalie is 6-0. I mean, and he's not playing.
Yeah.
He's not playing. This is an Alex Lyon a couple years ago for Florida giving way to Bobrovsky. This is a guy who is 6-0 not playing. Edmonton is much deeper than I think I even realized. I didn't see guys like, Klingberg making the contribution that he has. Evander Kane and Trent Frederick able to slide in seamlessly. This is a deep team at every position. Suddenly you've got guys like Kasperi Kapanen and Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner parachuting out of the press box. Now, whatever you may think of them, these are NHL players who've scored 20, 30, and 40 goals in a regular season. They're not chopped liver. They can play, and they're not washed. So it's a deeper team than I think I realized, because, like I said, when you look at the goaltending, that's the perfect example. A guy who has not had a good regular season, all of a sudden in the wins that he has in the playoffs, I think Stuart Skinner's save percentage is 97. I mean, come on. Like, that's absurdity. Can that continue in the Stanley Cup Final? He's going to need 3 or 4 of those to beat the Florida Panthers, because as many superlatives as I might have to say about Edmonton, Florida can counter with superlatives down the line. That's why I think this is going to be just a tremendous final.
I've said on this show through the playoffs, I feel the Panthers are actually playing better, and by better I mean defensively, better in this year's playoff run than they did in last year's playoff run. In what ways is Edmonton better equipped to handle what Florida is going to throw at them this year as opposed to last year, if you feel they are better equipped?
Well, I think number 1 is the depth, and number 2 is, like Florida, defensive responsibility. I think you guys would concede, and I know you don't see them as much as I do, but the Dallas Stars are a proud veteran club. They didn't make it easy on Tampa. I think they rallied in game 5 to force a game 6. They're not easy to knock out. They're a tough veteran team who's been around it forever. Now, they haven't won it, but they've been around it. And in 3 third periods to close out the series with their season on the line and all the desperation that comes for playing for a veteran team where it might be the last kick at the can, the Stars in those 60 minutes managed a grand total of 12 shots on net. And in the third period of game 5, with their season actually on the line, with them knowing they were shaking hands after the game if they don't win, down 2, they don't get a shot on net for the final 10 and a half minutes. I mean, that's hard to believe. And I think, Dave, when Edmonton first rose to prominence, you'd agree with me. That is not how they won games. That is not how they were dangerous. I mean, when Tampa would beat Edmonton in those years, it was 6-4, and Vasilevsky didn't always look great, but he usually won. And that's because Edmonton was leaky. They're not leaky anymore. This is a good defensive club. Look at their expected goals against the last couple of years. And again, I don't love old school statistics, but this is a better defensive club than I think anyone, including me, realizes.
Jack, lastly, everybody talks about legacy and McDavid, Draisaitl. I mean, obviously that's not going to go away until they win it, but how have they handled these expectations up to this point?
Well, I mean, they've soldiered on for years as kind of, 2 men and a compilation. This year, and you guys have followed the playoffs as much as anyone, how many times have they been all over highlight reels? Not many. I mean, McDavid scored a beautiful breakaway goal that turns out to be the game winner against Dallas in game 5. Draisaitl has a couple of overtime winners, but they don't have these. Draisaitl had 17 points in a 5-game series against Calgary. Like, ridiculous. I mean, they haven't had those type of games. Connor McDavid's best game was the one Edmonton lost in game 1 of the LA series, where he single-handedly brought the Oilers back, from 5-1. I mean, who does that? McDavid can. But outside of that, it's really been a collective effort. They've got 14 forwards with a goal in the Stanley Cup playoffs. You can only play 12. Again, their backup goalie is 6-0. I think Draisaitl and McDavid feel like, and they should feel like, that they've had more help than ever before. That's borne out in the percentage of goals scored by the Oilers in this postseason that belongs to them. A couple years ago, it was 47%. Now it's like 18, 17%. I mean, that's a good spot to be. And as far as legacy, I think Edmonton is much like Tampa in the sense that if Tampa doesn't get it done, a 62-win season and all the, all the numbers that team put up for years would ultimately be remembered as much the way the San Jose Sharks are. Very good hockey club that got close but never won it. Tampa solidified its legacy and the reputation of guys like Kucherov and Stamkos with a pair of Stanley Cup wins and another trip to the final, not to mention the trip to the final they had in 2015. The Oilers have done everything but win a cup. That legacy, fair or not, won't be cemented until they do. That's what's at stake here in this Stanley Cup final.
Last one for me, Jack. We were chatting with Doug Plagans earlier this year, and he said something repeated to us that he heard from Paul Maurice in last year's final relating to having home ice. And Paul Maurice said, not overly important, except when you have the cross-country flight. And he felt last year's final gave Florida an advantage because Edmonton had to make the extra trip cross-country. This year, the roles are reversed. Do you believe that? Do you think that having home ice may give the Oilers some kind of advantage, less about getting last change and more about less time on an airplane?
I think it will. I do. I absolutely believe Edmonton would have won last year's Stanley Cup if Game 7 was played on its ice. If you remember Game 7, it was kind of a tepid affair, quite frankly. It was a low event, low energy type of game, and Florida won it. That's not necessarily Edmonton's strength. I mean, I talked about Edmonton's smothering defense, but they don't want low energy. They don't want low event. They want to feel that vibe from the crowd. And I believe that'll tip the scales in Edmonton's favor this time around. I do think it makes a huge difference. And I would say also, respectfully, it's hard to explain, but there is a hum and a pain that echoes through your eardrums in Rogers Place unlike any other. I'm not saying that because I'm the Oilers broadcaster, but this city and the noise in that building is powerful. Like, I mean, it is ridiculous. It hurts. And again, I can compare Florida to Edmonton. I can't compare Tampa. I haven't been there for a Stanley Cup final the way you have, Dave. But I will say this. I do think home ice means a great deal. And I do think in this series, that tips the scales in favor of Edmonton. And in a series where I expect the margins to be small, that's why I expect the Oilers to win.
Jack, enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. You never know when you're going to get these opportunities. To be in the middle of everything is awesome. And maybe we'll talk to you after it's all said and done when you're ready to lift that Stanley Cup, hopefully.
We'll see what happens, but definitely looking forward to it. I know which way Tampa's leaning, that's for sure. So it's good to have support.
Yeah, I think for the most part you're going to have Edmonton South here on the west coast of Florida.
That's kind of what I figured. So I knew I wasn't going to get a call from Friendly Fire Florida radio station. We'll put it to you that way. Take care, guys.
Thanks,
Enjoy
Jack.
the series, Jack.
You
Appreciate you. Jack Michaels, good work partner, getting Jack on there, and it's good to hear from somebody that's going to be covering.
He's a great friend of the show.
He is.
When Power Lunch calls Jack, Jack answers.
He answers.
What? Media Day? I can
these guys
put
first.
that off.
Well, our audience, I think, likes to have different perspectives. That's one of the things we took from our audience this year. We've tried to have more guests on, and I think in this setting, it's nice to have somebody who's there.
And he had a great point, and he was much closer to it than I was. And really, it's my own ignorance not following Edmonton as closely as I could have or maybe should have. But it wasn't that they added a bunch of players at the deadline. They added Trent Frederick. But it was more that based on injuries and just the lineup considerations and guys, when they were coming back, when they were able to play, when they were able to slot in, they really didn't get their full team together until the LA series. And so from that standpoint, it kind of makes sense that, it's not automatic that you're going to click, but they did click.
I mean, you forget they have Evander Kane because he was out.
Yeah, exactly. He was out
season.
so long. And Klingberg looked like his career was over.
Yeah.
After he left Dallas, he was in Anaheim and Toronto and just like, is this guy going to be an NHLer? He's been very effective for Edmonton.
And I think you're right. And I think in a lot of instances, to win the Cup, you need a lot of things to break. We know that here in Tampa. You also just need guys to sometimes find the fountain of youth, rejuvenate themselves. You can say playing well at the right time. That does happen. And perhaps for Edmonton, getting some of these guys back or getting guys who struggled in the regular season. Oftentimes, partner, you and I talk about the postseason can be that second season for them, and it's like, I don't care what you did in the regular season.
Yeah,
this counts, and
that's what he said about some of their veterans. They weren't rope-a-doping. They weren't. No. Players try, but they kind of got on a roll. And when you're getting on a roll and you have the wind at your back, maybe you have a little bit more giddy up to your game. He said they look faster than they did for much of the regular season.
I think for me, in this series, it's pretty simple, but I think it holds true. Yes, defense, we're going to see who defends harder. And I think some people would give the edge to Florida just based off of their track record. I do think goaltending is going to be an interesting situation for Edmonton. Probably more question marks heading into the series for them, even though Skinner has played well at moments and maybe even bigger moments than at times. But it feels like Florida has done a better job of allowing Bobrovsky not to have to stand on his head game in and game out.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if Edmonton... I think Edmonton has gotten to that point. Have they done it as consistently as Florida? That's the
question. They have in the last, I would say, round and a half.
Yes.
I'm not sure they were there as at the level that they are at now at the beginning of the Vegas series. And they got into trouble early in the Vegas series because their penalty kill was still giving up, frankly, too many goals. But there's no question they finished that Vegas series really well defensively. And outside, in terms of a period that hurt them, outside of the third period of game one against Dallas, they had a great defensive series. And Jack's right. It's not like they beat a team that came out of left field to get to the conference final. The Dallas Stars are a seasoned, strong team. We were saying after the second round how impressed we both were with the Stars. And Edmonton, like Jack said, made them look ordinary. But the Panthers have made their opponents look ordinary too. And I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to keep right on saying what I have been saying about the Panthers, even though they gave up 3 goals in their clinching win against Carolina. They are not going to give up much in this series.
Right.
This is their bread and butter. They are too close now. It is going to require from the Oilers the sort of team defense that we've seen from Edmonton basically in the conference final and going back to the end of the Vegas series. But here's what has worked for Edmonton. They basically have played with the lead throughout. The only time they didn't have the lead in the Dallas series was game 1 when they blew the lead. Florida has shown that they're really tough when they get the lead, but they can also win when they don't get the lead.
Sure.
And they rally. That happened to Edmonton earlier in the playoffs. But they are taking on a whole different beast here. So if they fall behind 2-0 in the first period with a power play goal against, it is going to take a huge performance to get back in that game against Florida. And but Jack is I would say confident. Based on what he said at the end of that chat, he likes the Oilers. He thinks it's going to be a tough, heavy lift for Florida to have road success in this series, even though the Panthers arguably have been better on the road this year in the playoffs than they have been at home. And their record kind of backs that up.
Is it fair to say, and this is with all due respect to the Lightning and the players they have, that this will be the Panthers' greatest challenge when it comes to facing elite players playing pretty well? I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl, these are, you can make the case, these are, McDavid's the best player in the game. And Draisaitl, would you agree in that top 5, if not top 5, top 8? I mean,
but it's been a collective performance.
It
That's what
it has been.
Again, Jack was saying. It's not like they've been on a bunch of highlight reels. I kind of go to this. Throughout the history of the NHL, we'll say in the last 25 years, it has proven to be difficult, first of all, to win back-to-back. Second of all, to win back-to-back against the same opponent. I mean, remember the Red Wings and Penguins in 08 and 09. Now, the Penguins needed to rally in 09. They were down 2-0. They were down 3-2. They had to win a Game 7 on the road. But when you get a crack at the same opponent the next year in the final, at least recently, which I say recently because it doesn't happen very often, but it feels like the team that lost the first year does come back and win the second year. I think there have been a couple of other examples. I remember the Oilers and Islanders, right, in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, right.
The Islanders won their 4th in a row and swept Edmonton. And then the next year, which was kind of the coming-out party for the Gretzky-era Oilers, they beat the Islanders. But at that point, the Islanders were going to their 5th straight Stanley Cup final. I mean,
incredible.
Yeah, that was, and they were worn down. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting series, but I maintain that I don't know about low energy. I agree with Jack. Like a low energy game is not really in the best interest of either of these teams. But I think the winning team is going to predicate its success on playing a low scoring game in that they're not going to give up much to the other team. And the team that is better at doing that is going to be in a better position to win. Now watch me be completely wrong, and we may see 7-6 in game 1, but
it's hard to gauge. We'll find out.
It's hard to gauge.
I think the points you made are valid. They always get into this legacy stuff, but it's out there for a reason. There's a reason why certain players who have done very well statistically, but haven't won, aren't sometimes in that conversation of the 5 best players of all time at their position. And maybe that doesn't matter, but it's fun to talk about. Dan Marino, I think I've told you this, he's probably the most talented quarterback I've ever seen play. I mean, the guy could fling a football left and right. Didn't matter. He gets the 1 Super Bowl, right? And he loses.
Yeah.
And it's like
early.
Yeah. And
it's like his
Dan Marino,
second year, first
right.
or second year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dan Marino, has that hanging over his head, even though when you watched him play, clearly was as elite as they get. But because he didn't do it, it weighed on him.
Mm-hmm.
Mario Lemieux, until he won something. That's kind of the knock on him.
They said the same about Ovechkin.
But McDavid, when he retires, his numbers are going to be right up there with.
Yeah.
It might not be Gretzky's. I mean, Gretzky's, that's a different animal. But, I mean, you could see him putting up the numbers that Sidney Crosby put up. You could see him cracking in the top 10, scoring all time. And to be in that position, if you have a Stanley Cup, what does that do when you start talking about, okay, the very all-time greats? And I think for him, not that he's dwelling on that. He just wants to win a cup because I think they've been close. I think that will be something that will be written about when you start talking about Connor McDavid because he's not 22 anymore. He's a little older.
No.
And how many chances are you going to get to be in this opportunity, especially in Edmonton? And we'll see how that plays out. But I think just another interesting storyline that we're all going to be watching. I think Jack's right. I think probably most Lightning fans are going to be rooting for Edmonton. Although, if you're not rooting for Canada, I'm okay with that. and you go from there and have a lot of fun with it. But I think it will be 2 teams, let's face it, that are playing at a very high level. And I think that hopefully we see some good hockey.
Well, I mean, the stat is, a Canadian-based team has not won a Stanley Cup since 1993 when the Canadians did it. But think of all the Canadian teams that have gotten to a final. I mean, the Lightning themselves have won 2 cups against Canadian-based teams, Calgary and Montreal. Edmonton has been there a couple of times. They lost to Carolina in 2006. They lost to the Panthers last year. Vancouver lost to Boston in 2011. I'm just going off the top of my head here. Ottawa lost to Anaheim in 2007. So, I mean, Toronto notably has not gotten there, right? But most of the other teams, have at least gone deep in the playoffs and reached a final, just not able to win. So maybe it'll end this year, but I'll maintain what I've been saying. Like, it is not nothing to knock off the champs. It is hard to beat the champs.
You made that point early on during this playoff run, and
they're playing like
it
the
holds
champs.
true.
If the Panthers had played like they played during the regular season, they would not be where they are right now. That's why a lot of people didn't pick them against the Lightning. Yeah. But after they beat the Lightning, most of the pundits are picking the Panthers, like in the subsequent series, even though they didn't have home ice. Most of the people who are picking that I'm seeing on like media sites or through the NHL, like the pundits through the NHL's website, writers, broadcasters, etc., they do their picks for every series. I look at them, just I'm curious, like, what's the feeling? Like, if there is a consensus, what is the consensus about which team is kind of rolling right now? And after the Lightning lost to the Panthers and people saw the Panthers were playing, the Panthers, by a wide margin, had more people picking them against Toronto, and by a wide margin had more people picking them against Carolina, even though they didn't have home ice. I haven't actually seen the predictions in this series, but Edmonton's going to have to play championship level hockey to win the championship, and that's what you probably want to see, right? If you're not a fan of either one of these teams, you want to see a deserving team get it and win it.
Do you want to see Corey Perry?
That would be some story, because his first cup and his only cup win came very early in his career. I think his second or third pro year, 2007 with Anaheim. They beat Ottawa. I just mentioned that. And then we talked about this is his 5th Stanley Cup final in the last 6 years, and he's 0-4 in the first 4.
That part is interesting. You talk about a guy who's a little bit opposite of Pat Maroon there towards the end of his career. Yeah. But I think and he's played well, actually. Corey Perry's played well in this postseason.
They are really in sync. And I keep harping on Edmonton's penalty kill. Edmonton's power play has been quite good through the playoffs. And so that'll be another key, like we say, keys to the series.
Yeah.
Florida's penalty kill. How is it going to handle what the Oilers are going to try and do? Because, I mean, there's no disputing the immense skill that the Oilers can throw on the power play. Not having Zach Hyman hurts 5-on-5 and on the power play. But it didn't really hurt them at the end of that Dallas series. They had to play the last few games without him, and they locked it down, and their power play gave them a boost, and they were deserving of that series win. There's no question.
Yeah.
So it's also a series in which there are a lot of 2-day breaks, which I can kind of understand when you factor in the travel. But, I mean, I think there's a 2-day break between games 3 and 4 even.
Yeah.
Which is curious. So it's going to take a while for this series to get played.
Let's get into July.
Yeah. You just made that point last week. Can we please end the Stanley Cup playoffs before the end of June?
I mean, it's just...
Well, if one team wins 4 straight, it will not be as long. But even then, I think there are 2 days between games 2 and 3 and 2 days between games 3 and 4. In that 2 days with no game.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Got to worry about the ice and everything like that. Go ahead.
We started with Yanni Gourde. We can get back to Yanni Gourde.
Right.
So you said you were surprised that they re-signed him, and I'm guessing your surprise was not that they re-signed him, but that they re-signed him to a 6-year deal.
Correct.
So he's 33. When the deal ends, he will be 39. He's going to turn 39 in December of his final season of the contract. So actually had it up. I think it's 2.33 or something like that is the the cap hit. So the people that are like, oh my gosh, 6 years, forget about that. Like, Yanni is not forgetting about it. That was the important component of this deal for Yanni Gourde, because he probably could have gotten more in terms of an AAV if he had signed elsewhere for less, or even had he said to the Lightning, I don't want 6 years, I'd rather make more and then be a free agent sooner. I think it was very important to him, and we heard as much from him yesterday, that getting the term was very important. He wants to finish his career here. He loves it here. He wants to settle in with his family and not worry about moving. He got a no trade clause too, or a no move clause. So he's here. So what does this mean for the Lightning? The 2.33 number is going to be less of a percentage of your overall cap hit immediately, because the cap is going up. Next year it's going up, the year after it's going up, the year after. And I read Chris Johnston's article. He wrote an article for The Athletic / the New York Times talking about how smart this was for the Lightning to do it this way, which they actually tried to do with Stamkos. And they tried to do it. I didn't realize this with Alex Killorn. I knew that they offered Killorn less than what he took in Anaheim. I didn't realize, and this is what he had in there, so I guess he got it on record somehow, or he found out about it, that they offered Killorn a long-term deal with the lower dollar amount per year. So the overall money may add up, right? Like if you're at, let's just say 3 per year times 6, that's 18 million, as opposed to doing, 3 years at 6 million per. It's the same money. It's just you're getting less per year and you're getting term as a benefit. So what does this mean for the Lightning? In the short term, they're getting a 33-year-old Yanni Gourde, and they were very happy to get him last year. Let's just presume, he is going to slot in and continue to be Yanni Gourde, the Yanni Gourde that we know and love. If at some point over the next 6 years, Yanni Gourde starts slowing down, and that's really the concern when you give a guy who's 33 a 6-year deal, what does that actually mean? Well, he could get hurt, and Chris brought this up. Well, then you have the long-term injury option. I'm not talking about in 3 years. Let's say by, the middle of year 5, or by the time he gets into year 6, he's got some problem. It's like, you could look at long-term injury. It's like, if he is not injured, but just not as effective, you could send him to the minors. And right now we know that the first $1 million plus a little bit is exempt from the cap. In 6 years, and there will be a CBA negotiated in between now and then, you figure that number is going to go up. That was Chris's point. So there is very little downside, actually, to this contract for the Lightning. If they have a player at the end of the contract who is not at the level that he is right now, you have options, right? And it's not going to be some anchor of a cap hit. The upside is tremendous. What if Yanni doesn't slow down, right? What if he's basically the same player throughout? You get a guy in a very dollar-friendly contract locked up. So Julian said at the end of the year that it was his hope to get Gourde re-signed. He said as much when they acquired Yanni. He actually said it when they acquired Yanni and Bjorkstrand from Seattle. And then he just said, I'd like to bring back our free agents, but, they have a vote too, basically. So Yanni wanted to stay, Julian wanted him to stay, and they worked out a deal that I think both sides are very happy with.
I think
I think if you're a Lightning fan, there's really no, you tell us, Lightning fans, but I don't see any downside to this contract when you understand that the dollar commitment is not going to be an onerous one if the term becomes a little bit of a problem.
The downside is just if he completely falls off and can't play. That's just.
But you have options then.
You do have options. That's the worst thing that could happen. Yanni Gourde gets on this team, and it feels like the wear and tear of playing the style he's played over the years hits him, and he's just not effective. That's the downside.
Yeah.
You just don't have an effective player, and you've got to replace him. You're right. The salary cap going up, and then his average monetary value per season, it's not that big. It's not that big. So basically, I think what we're saying is low risk. And while the ceiling may not be as high for Yanni Gourde as it once was, if he plays the way he did when he was brought over physical, chips in scoring. You and I have discussed depth scoring is something we wanted to see them address. Yanni Gourde was part of that. He wasn't the key ingredient. Bjorkstrand was, but you're adding a competent NHL player who still we think has some tread on those tires.
Mm-hmm.
This could be something where you don't have to worry all the time about where your bottom six is, because you would think Yanni Gourde gives you position flexibility if he's playing really well, where he can go up on a first or second line if you need to. John Cooper knows that he can play with skilled players. Or, ideally, do you want to see Yanni in a third-line role and just play between 12 and 15 minutes?
Right.
And play hard.
And be the third-line center.
And be the
as
third-line
well.
center. Correct.
See how the Lightning's lineup kind of shakes out? I mean, they still have a preponderance of centers. When you're counting Point, you're counting Cirelli, you're counting Nick Paul and Gourde. Those are 4 centers. Is Luke Glendening going to be back? If he is, that's a 5th center. If he's not, I do think the Lightning are going to try and find somebody who's able to fill Glendening's role as kind of a face-off specialist. So that means that one of those guys I mentioned is going to be playing on the wing.
Right.
Phil at least feels Gourde. Phil likes all the centers to be centers. So take this with a grain of salt, but he likes Gourde in the middle as opposed to on the wing. But he said the same about Nick Paul. He said the same about Cirelli. Yeah.
I get that. So, but a lot of times, as we have seen in today's NHL, you often have 2 centers on each line.
Yeah.
Or they can't play that position, just from the face-off perspective. So, curious what our fans think about it. Yanni Gourde coming back. Let us know at Bolts Radio. Again, we're going to be doing this show until the finals are done.
Yeah.
So, we'll have
well, we both have
weeks.
some vacation coming up later this month, so we may cease it at that point. But we may have some stuff to talk about with awards. We did see that Anthony Cirelli finished 3rd in the Selke voting, which is, look, that's good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with Barkov winning it. He is some kind of player.
He's
that
the guy. He's the guy. He's a tremendous talent. But it's nice to be honored.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see if Ryan McDonough gets any Norris Trophy votes.
Well, it is interesting because they send the full list.
Yeah.
You can see the full list, and Hagel got some votes.
Nice.
It is interesting, though, that Reinhart was 2nd. So most people, and this is a year in which the Panthers were just okay in the regular season. So a lot of that, I think, is based on rep.
Yeah.
That, Barkov and Reinhart didn't take each other's votes. They both got votes from a lot of the writers who voted on it.
The awards are what they are.
I sense something snarky coming from you.
The awards.
I could just see from the expression on your face.
It is what it is. You want to get to a couple of questions here?
Yeah,
too?
let's
we
do
got,
that.
Jim, we always love hearing from Jim, from Jacksonville, weighing in via email. He said, in the last Stars-Oilers game, when Jake Ottinger was pulled, I could see both sides of the story where he should stay or be replaced. I've listened to Sean McDonough for many years for all sports. I was very surprised by his strong disagreement with the move taking place. Surprised because I can't recall a play-by-play announcer with an opinion like that to go on and on throughout the first period and beyond. Sometimes, like Chief and Phil, an analyst will say something, but we'll move on. Very rare to hear the lead broadcaster disapprove a situation and keep talking about it, really in any sport. Your thoughts?
So, Jim, I did tune in, but I missed the first period. I was out. So by the time I got back, I watched the middle of the game on, and the move had already been made. So I didn't hear what McDonough had to say. Look, he's got a microphone. And he's entitled to give an opinion. I don't know if he hammered it as hard as Jim indicated. And look, if the producer feels that, the talent, as it's called, goes over the line, they can have a conversation with them during a TV timeout like, hey, you made your point, time to back off. And clearly that didn't happen. I don't know. I think it was a very controversial move in that there was a lot of blowback toward Pete DeBoer after that game, both in terms of the move and then how he described it afterward. I mean, he was pretty frank. He was like, at that point, Jake had lost 6 of 7 games against Edmonton, going back to last year's conference final. And he's just like, I didn't like what I was seeing. So I needed to make a change, which he's the head coach, and that's his prerogative. I don't know. Like, I saw the one goal that Janmark scored. The guy's in alone. So it wasn't that he was giving up dribblers from 70 feet, that squeezed through his pads. I think the reason Dallas lost the series was twofold. They were not as good defensively as they had been earlier in the playoffs. And in being poor defensively, or at least not as good defensively, they continually were in a catch-up mode. And they couldn't play catch-up against an Edmonton team that, as we just talked about with Jack Michaels, was playing basically championship-level defense, particularly as the game got into the third period. So that was the biggest problem Dallas had. Was it that, they outplayed Edmonton and their goalie just gave up a bunch of soft goals and that's why they lost? I don't think that's a fair explanation of, what happened in the series. But look, you're taking out one of the best goalies in the game, a guy who plays, as we say, 3 out of every 4.
Yeah.
And, they were able to score 3 goals in that game. So Casey DeSmith took the loss. Ottinger didn't take the loss. So had he kept Ottinger in, who knows what might have happened. That also adds fuel to the debate. But responding to what Jim had to say, I kind of agree that it's rare for a play-by-play guy on a national broadcast where it's not, especially when it's not like a team broadcast, to kind of dig in like that. But Sean McDonough is an experienced broadcaster, and he felt strongly enough to kind of take a stand there. And nobody at the network kind of basically nudged him to step back. So that tells you that they were okay with it too.
Let me give you my 2 cents on it. Just because you have a mic, this is going to be weird to say, you've got to be responsible with it. And everybody knows their role. Play-by-play guy knows the role. You've got a mic. Color guy, mic. Producer has a mic. A lot of people involved in these things. You understand what you're supposed to do in broadcasts. Is it rare for a play-by-play guy like that to give his opinion as long as he did? You betcha. 100%. Did he have a valid point? I think that's up for debate. People can have that conversation, and that might be something you do after the game when you're discussing and doing your recap. I think you're allowed to give your opinion. To go on and on, I think, takes away from the job that you're doing, which is calling the game.
Jim noticed it to the point that
and I'll
he
say
fed us a question about it.
A lot of people did. I had some people who I follow in the media nationally and locally that have said, Sean, that's the job of the color commentator, not you. Just call the game. Now, that may be harsh, but I think if you take that emotion away from that saying right there, there's a lot of truth to it. Your job is to set the scene, call the game, and the color analyst is supposed to add some color to calling it. Some do it better than others. We understand that. And is it going to impact my opinion on Sean McDonough as a play-by-play man because he maybe went over the line giving his opinion on something that some people feel he's not qualified to do? Maybe that's a poor choice of words. No, probably not. I would just say I think you got to know where you are in the broadcast. You can give your opinion, but don't go on and on.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say something like, and boy, the Stars are pulling Jake Ottinger. Chief, that seems like a sudden move. What do you make of that? There you go.
Right.
And then you let the color guy do his thing, and then it's over with. And, another time to talk about that is when you're getting ready for the next period to begin. You usually know you got a couple of minutes there. You're recapping what happened in the first period or the second period, and you come back and you say, of course, Chief, one of the big storylines in this series has been goaltending, and the Stars decided to pull Ottinger after the first period. How's this going to impact them in the third? Something like that. And then that's where you can get into that a little bit more. So it's not necessarily that he talked about it. It's maybe how long he talked about it and when he talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably how I would answer that question for you, Jim. So if you want to react to that, you can. I believe we have another question. This comes from Peter on YouTube. Do you think Jack Finley could have a shot at fourth-line center?
Well, I did read the Lightning have $3 million in change still available, and that is a number that includes 12 forwards, including Connor Sherry and Connor Geekie. So, I mean, I think Connor Sherry is going to get another opportunity to be on the NHL roster, certainly at camp, but so are the guys that are kind of knocking at the door from Syracuse. So I will answer it this way, Peter. I think I will be surprised if the Lightning go through another full season, basically at 21 on the active roster and not more, unless they are right up against the cap again and they are looking to save money to make a deadline deal, because it was a heavy lift and they had to stay injury-free, which for the most part they did until the very end of the regular season. So assuming that we are looking at a number closer to 23, if not 23, then you may have some extra guys that are scratched and there are more spots available, you know, in training camp in the preseason. And Finley played a game last year. So Steve says $3.4 million does not include Gage Gonsalves, who is an RFA. 12 forward, 16, 2 goalies under contract in the salary cap number. So is Gonsalves going to command a contract in that $3 million range? Unknown. But if he fills one of the spots, you know, maybe Sherry isn't that guy, right? Sherry still carries a little bit of a cap hit, but it's not much of one in the minors.
Right.
So he could be honestly replaced by somebody who's making the league minimum.
Sure. I'm not sure there was a player that grew more than Gonsalves, which was one of the biggest storylines, as you mentioned. And I think Geekie is another guy that can he take the same steps Gonsalves did during his second half of the year this past year at the beginning of this year.
And let's see where Dylan Duke is at in camp. I mean, the Lightning have, I mean, they don't have like 8, 9 guys at forward, but they have some that I think are going to be coming into camp saying, I want to make an impression. I want to try and grab one of these spots.
You know,
we'll see if they make another move though to bring in another free agent.
For sure. And I think,
and that doesn't include the Glendening spot, because that is an open spot too.
It is an open spot. I mean, like Julian said, I think they like a lot of their team and what they did. I think you don't overreact in a situation like this when they lost to, a team that got to the Stanley Cup Finals. And so I think you have to be level-headed about analyzing your team and where they are. Are there areas the Lightning can get better and are hoping that they improve? For sure. And I think the way you do that isn't by necessarily having the veterans come back and continue to put up the points they've put up. I mean, you're kind of anticipating that. I don't think you're looking at Kucherov and Point and Gensel, and I'm pointing to those guys, partners specifically, as saying they've hit a wall and their production will decrease. I still think they're in the prime of their careers, and their production should still be relatively high. I think where you can start making more than on-the-margin improvements are the younger guys who have untapped potential. And I think a full year of Gonsalves playing the way he did last year towards the second half of the season could elevate the Lightning's play. Connor Geekie, a full year in the NHL, hopefully, where he is somebody that can produce, and whatever that number is, that'll be very encouraging to see. And then to your point, you have another maybe small wave of some players come up. I mean, is Crozier going to be somebody who's a mainstay on that back end? Are they going to find a way to get him?
Yeah, because Perbix is not included in this list because he's a pending free agent.
And so, you know, a lot of people felt like Crozier at the worst case scenario was the second half of last season should have been up here with the Lightning, but because of circumstances, he just, wasn't here. Yeah. He's a guy, I think, if I tell you he's going to be in your top 6, you probably wouldn't flinch too much. What steps is Lilleberg going to take next year? Those players have the chance or the ability to give the Lightning a higher ceiling next year, assuming the star players don't drop off drastically with their production. And I think that's an encouraging sign for the Lightning. Of course, the X factor in all of this will be, does Julien Brisebois do something in the offseason that makes sense? And when I say makes sense, is there a trade out there or a signing, that we're not privy to, that really elevates this team in a way that they don't have a ton of weaknesses? And I'm not sure they have a ton of weaknesses right now. But wherever you think those may be, can he shore them up even more, knowing that the cap's going up and that the Lightning still have a pretty good spot of young players coming up, and their star players are still relatively young, all things considered. So I think still a pretty good sweet spot for the Lightning. I think the way things will shape out next year, in part, will be how does some of these younger players build off of this following year. And I think that'll be fun to watch, for all of us. I'm curious what our audience has to say at Bolts Radio. If they want to get involved in the conversation, they can. I got an email, partner, earlier today, right before we hopped on, and you were in the press release.
Yes. Well, I think I'm familiar with this press release.
Do you want to talk about it? Because it is.
Yeah, well, I have a busy week.
Friday,
this is one reason why we're recording on Tuesday, which I'm glad we did it today because Jack was available to talk about the final. So we talked last week. Tomorrow is the Sports Club of Tampa Bay Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and I'm very honored to be included with a list that includes John Cooper, and Tony Dungy is getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. Right. Dick Vitale is in the list, Evan Longoria as well. So that's tomorrow. That's not really anything that, unless fans have already gotten tickets, right. I'm pretty sure it's sold out. Friday, there is a comedy improv club in Ybor City called The Commodore that is fairly new. You know my family well enough, Greg, to know that, we do have kind of a performing theater component. My wife and I met in community theater. Both my kids have done theater. My wife teaches theater, children's theater. And we love going to shows. We love going to performances. So a few months back, we went to the Commodore on a Friday night. And once a month on Friday nights, they have this special where they invite a guest storyteller from the Tampa Bay area. The storyteller is someone of note in that they have some interesting stories to tell. Maybe they've written a book. Maybe they just have lived an interesting life. They tell a story, and then the improv actors do improv based on the story. And then the storyteller comes up and tells another story after like 10 minutes, and the improv group does improv based on that. So Dulcie and I went to one of these a few months ago, and one of the improv actors recognized me. And thank you, Gabe Marte, for the GoPro camera for YouTube, which is one reason why I'm probably recognized more now than I was a few years ago. Anyway, he said, look, when the season is over, we'd love to have you be the guest storyteller at some point down the road. I said, that would be great. So we got it set up. They want me to bring Stella. So Stella is coming. My family's coming too. But, if you decide you want to come out, you can meet me. You can meet Stella. There's a local bookstore that's going to be selling copies of Blind Squirrel because of the stories I am telling. 2, I believe, are going to be from the book, which are kind of funny parts of the book. So I'm trying to tee up the improv group that they can get some material from it. But some of them are going to be real life stories that are hockey related, basically. So if that's your deal, if that's something that sounds interesting, you can check it out. And on my X feed, I have links to buy tickets, but you can just look up the Commodore in Ybor City.
It's exciting.
And come on out. Yeah, it's something I've never really done before. So I'm brushing up on my public speaking more than I do with you. That I have a thing at the Hall of Fame induction tomorrow, and then
you have any
and then
tips
the
for
thing on
public
Friday.
Because I think a lot of people, sometimes they take it in class, college, they'll do a public speaking.
I never try to imagine people in their underwear, which you hear that or whatever. Honestly, Greg,
I have a format.
I have spent so much time talking in front of a microphone, which is not public speaking, but I think I have done it so much in my life that when I stand in front of a microphone that's not in a studio, or in a press box, I'm just in front of people, I kind of just react the same way. I think the key is to, best you can, speak as if you're talking to one person. Right. Like we're speaking to however many listeners and viewers we have out there, but really I'm speaking to you, Greg. Yeah. And it's like we're having a conversation. And I think that has kind of served me well. But I mean, you have to have some comfort in doing it. Not everybody is comfortable talking in front of a big group of people, and you have to be okay to step over yourself and get your tongue tied and laugh about it, which happens.
Yeah, you're human, right?
How about you? Do you have any
I like
tips?
I think the focus on trying to focus on one area and not be looking around too much. I think the other thing too is slowing down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people have a tendency to speed up and talk real fast, probably because they're nervous. I think this is like in life in general. I think people are more receptive to people who understand that you're going to make mistakes. It happens. And if you can just be as real as possible, I think that comes out better when you're speaking to people. And so that would be the advice. And then, of course, experience. But that's just, you got to do more of those to fully feel comfortable. And I get that. All right. So we are going to be back at it again. We think sometime next week, right? And we'll let our audience know.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about
game 1 is tomorrow, game 2 is Friday, and then there are the 2 days.
Game 3 is
they're
in
not
July,
playing on the
right?
weekend? Is it Friday to Monday?
That's incredible.
I guess I should have memorized the schedule. That seems weird. Maybe we'll look at Tuesday again. We can look at the first 3 games of the series and see how things are shaping up. I hope Edmonton gives Florida a good series.
Yeah.
I'm less confident than Jack about the Oilers' prospects. I think they can win the series. I think it is going to take championship-level hockey, as I said. Game 2 is Saturday. So there are 3 days between games 1 and 2 in that 2 off days? I guess so. All right.
Watch.
Yeah.
It's Friday. Steve said it's Friday.
My bad, it's Friday. Yeah, I think they have the weekend off, which is strange. But we'll look at Tuesday. We'll keep you posted, everyone.
We will.
We'll do a social media post. Game 3 is Monday. Extra day for travel. Right, but then they have the 2 days in between games 3 and 4, I think, as well.
This is real time.
Yes.
And that's what we love.
Clearly, we talk about making mistakes and being okay with that. We can make lots of mistakes as far as the schedule is concerned because the Lightning are not in it. So we don't need to be completely dialed in to travel plans and everything else.
For sure.
We just know that we're going to be on next week at some point, and we'll talk about the games that have been played.
Partner, it's always great catching up with you. Have fun. Have fun on
Thank you,
Friday.
Greg.
And we will talk when we talk. Thanks to Steve Versnick, Jack Michaels as well, and for everybody who listened today. We always appreciate you guys. I'm Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.